Welcome, everybody, to the Insight to Revenue podcast. Very excited for the conversation we're going to have today with our good friend, Sam Jacobs, founder and CEO of Pavilion, an amazing community globally of commercial leaders and operators, as well as other entrepreneurs who have really had a huge impact on my life over the last several years. And so excited to have Sam here for the first time on our podcast. Also probably mentioned the author of Kind Folks Finish First. Don't want to forget that plug. Sam, how you doing?
I'm okay. Yeah. How you doing, Zach? Good to see you.
Good to see you too. Doing great. Summer is finally here in Barcelona. So all is good. So to start off today, we are gonna, I think, let's start really small with the meaning of life. No, but as far as strategic topics, I think given your background, Sam, it's pretty unique. Obviously, you've had a long history and are well known as a commercial leader over the years in many different roles, and that led you to start Revenue Collective, which is now Pavilion. And now, as in your life as a founder, and your community and conversations with hundreds and hundreds of founders as well over the past several years, you've really become, widely known as somebody who, many circles we could consider as an oracle for the whole SaaS industry. And so I thought maybe we could start today and structure an interesting conversation around, hey, let's look back. There's been a huge evolution in the SaaS industry. Obviously, there was a real heyday over the last several years, and there's been some massive changes since 2021. And so for today, let's talk a little bit about old world and new world. So let's think today, or let's think at 2021 versus 5 years from now. So, first off, just to start with a bigger picture topic, what do you see happening right now in the industry? And if you think, out in the next 3 to 5 years, what do you think are going to be the most major changes with the whole SaaS industry as a whole?
Well, there's let's see, there's a couple of themes that I see happening right now in SaaS, and sort of going back to 2021, coming ahead to 2024, and then maybe looking ahead a couple of years. 2021, 0% interest rates, abundant capital, money flowing into high growth companies, more companies being started as a result, everybody hiring as a result, massive employment increases in the number of people working in venture capital backed B2B tech companies, as well as large go-to-market teams being built. And a lot of that was, people use a lot of morality terms, but it wasn't good or bad. It was just a reflection of the market. And effectively, there was tons of people hired, and there were buyers, technology buyers were buying more stuff, and it was sort of, I don't know if it was the golden age, but maybe you can call it the golden age of SaaS, in the sense that everything seemed rosy, everything seemed like it would go up to the right. Everybody thought that they could get 120% net revenue retention. Everybody thought that it made sense to have hundreds of SDRs supporting dozens of account executives, and that everything would keep working into perpetuity. And again, it wasn't exclusively a function of interest rates, but it was driven and facilitated by an abundance of capital. And so fast forward to today, and the central banks of the world, including the Fed, have dramatically raised interest rates to curb inflation, and VC funding has pulled way back. The IPO market has effectively closed, or has become much, much narrower. And there's been a push to efficiency, from growth at any cost to profitable, efficient growth over the last couple of years. And that means, in fact, if you look at data from Peter Walker, who's a friend of mine, and Carta, the size of the startup industry has contracted, right? So the size has the startup industry, the ecosystem of venture capital backed B2B tech companies, has gotten smaller. And that's because that's been a forcing function from the markets, saying that you have to run your businesses more effectively, and you can't just hire, hoping that any incremental dollar will redound to the benefit of your enterprise value. And in fact, I guess, sometimes, Zach, when you're like, this guy is the Oracle. I'm like, I'm not really an Oracle. But then I'm riffing statistics right now. I'm like, well, I do know a lot of shit off the top of my head. But anyway, and so if you look at Redpoint's recent deck that talks about sort of the state of funding in startups, 2021 effectively, growth, a dollar of growth was worth probably 12 to 15 times what a dollar profit was worth. And today that number is down to 2.9. So roughly, so it's still true that growth is worth more than profit, but the ratio has contracted by a function of like 75%. And so growth is now worth 3 times what profit is, which is a big difference than 15 times, obviously. And so where are we today? A couple of things have happened. First is that all of those SDRs, all of those, people, those humans that were hired and effectively poorly trained or undertrained in 2021, they flooded all of these channels with massive amounts of noise, and people became turned off to templated emails, templated LinkedIn messages, boring webinars, and the cost of acquisition, the cost of a new dollar, a new customer has increased relative to 2 years ago pretty significantly. At the same time that net revenue retention has also gone down. And all of that has put massive pressure on companies in the B2B space, whether or not they're SaaS or consumption-based or usage-based pricing. The contract structure and the pricing model doesn't really have. It's true that SaaS a little bit is under attack because people are tired of subscriptions. But generally speaking, the point is like it's become much tougher to operate. And some companies have adapted, and by adapting, they have cut their headcount and they've become much smaller. And it is fundamentally true, at least for now, because there's a countervailing force, which we all know, which I'm about to mention. But at least for now, growth has become less. Companies are going to grow less than they would have grown in 2021. And when we say companies weren't efficient, that doesn't mean that they weren't growing. They were still growing. Pavilion, my company, was growing faster in 2021 and 22 than it's growing now. And that's okay. But the reality is that companies are operating with a different profile, and they're saying, you know what, we might not be able to raise more money or have access to the same kind of capital, so we have to become more efficient. We have to make sure that we can stick around for 2, 3, 4, 5 years, and we're willing to sacrifice top-line growth if we're able to do that. Now, some companies are able to adjust. The problem is that a big chunk of companies pushed their valuation in the days of 2021 and 2022, and they are so far underwater on their valuation relative to their revenue profile that it can be demotivating and disorienting. They might be 5 years from being in the money on whatever they most recently raised money for. And some of them are just deciding that they don't know how to operate in this context, or that they're just, a feature, but they're not really a suite, a platform. And so the other thing that you see 2 things. You see consolidation, and then you also see efficiency and pushes for efficiency. And I'll stop there. We can
that's sure it's and just to break it down a little bit. So I hear a lot of people that are waiting for an event where this economic uncertainty, obviously the interest rates, price pressure, when are things going to start freeing up, or when is there going to be a dynamic change, or is this, are we shifting into a new normal? As we think about the U.S. election, some people say that's, we're basically going to be in this volatile holding pattern until after November or after the end of the year. When do you think selling gets easier, or do you think growth is different? And, I'm not asking you to predict the entire economy, but maybe the SaaS economy. What's the new normal look like as far as growth going into next year, do you think?
Well, I think, the data that I've seen and that Pavilion has released and other people have released indicate that people were hoping for a bigger rebound. Even, we're recording this in the middle of April, and this week the Fed, well, not the Fed, but, the CPI, the Consumer Price Index, came in a little hot, as they say. The markets reacted negatively. Basically, my point is everybody's hoping for some big rebound, particularly when the Fed or central banks are going to start lowering interest rates. And it's not clear that they're going to lower interest rates. At least they might not lower interest rates in 2024. And so what we're seeing from the data is that people were more enthusiastic at the beginning of the year. And as they see results come in, they're a little frustrated by what they're seeing. And that 2024 is not going to look worse than 2023, but it's not going to look markedly better. So what would be changes that would start changing the trajectory of the growth curve? Well, I do think AI. I think we've been in a speculative period where we're all learning to use ChatGPT or Claude or Gemini, whatever, on our own, and we're doing different weird stuff. Is there a direct flight from Barcelona to Austin, Texas? And I'm asking ChatGPT or I'm asking Gemini because it's just easier than sorting through 15 different links and getting clicked through to Expedia 50 times. So
Yeah.
we're all learning to use it on a personal level. But there is a large group of people that are building solutions that will enable us to do stuff really beginning in the second half of this year and heading into 2025 that I think at a minimum could just improve efficiency, meaning all of our companies become more profitable if they don't grow faster. But
Yeah.
I also do think that they could grow faster. And so where are the two areas that I particularly see AI coming into play? One is the function of if you distill the sales development representative down into maybe two things, possibly three. The first is research. Maybe you could call that a BDR. And then the second would be, connection. And I think research and data enrichment is a big place where AI can play a role. And I definitely think that obviously connection and engagement is a place where AI can play a role. So there's people that are building tools. So I think people's, and we'll see. It's always like, especially you're in Europe, Zach. So there's always privacy concerns, but there's always this tension between making it easier for people to access people to buy stuff, and then people putting up their walls and saying, "Don't access me in that way." But I do think that AI might be an accelerant to growth, or at least an accelerant to efficiency, in a way that could where companies would reinvest the proceeds back into growth. If you have a company that makes $10 in profit a year, and it can swap out some tools or some employees and make $30 in profit using AI, maybe it takes 20 of those bucks and hires back more people to run AI and more people to do outbound demand gen. And so I do think that central banks will lower interest rates. I do think that, things will start looking better. But I think it's probably going to be, really the first quarter of 2025 when we're going to start to feel a little bit more animal spirits when it comes to the economy. I think 2025 is going to be a good year. I think 2024 is a year of, continuing to grind a little bit.
Yeah. So folks hanging in there and holding their breath better figure out a new playbook, right?
Exactly.
So I guess let's start there as far as how is my job going to be different if I'm just a salesperson on the front lines 5 years from now than it is now? Like what do you think is the makeup of that role, how it's different, the profile for success?
Well, I think, what it's like the layer technology, what it's doing is like replacing the dumbest stuff, and it's moving upwards, right? And so for us to have meaningful roles in any job, sales is still going to be important. People are still going to want to talk to a real human being, I think.
Or at least people
I
of
don't
our
know what you.
generation will.
Yeah, exactly. And we're still going to be in control for a little while. So, but a lot of the other stuff will be handled by automation and by bots and stuff like that. Updating the CRM, that'll all be automatically happening in the background. A lot of information we'll be talking, and maybe on the side of my Zoom screen there'll be like all your entire profile and things that I might mention to you that might resonate with you. And so I think, but how does a salesperson stand out in that world? My guess is through creativity, through authenticity, through good storytelling. I think those are what are the things that AI, quote unquote, can't replace? And first of all, unfortunately, I think that list is much smaller than we would all hope. But for now, I think that AI can't replace the sense of genuine human curiosity and genuine human authenticity. I want to believe that, at least. And so what's the role of the salesperson? The salesperson is probably having way more qualified conversations with people that are interested in their solution. But the level, technology has replaced the dumb salespeople. So you got to be a smart salesperson. So to be a smart salesperson, what I mean is you got to be genuinely interested, genuinely curious, genuinely well-read, genuinely caught up. There's going to be no excuse for not. Research will be right in front of your eyes, right? Data will be right in front of your eyes. Zach's entire work history, his personality profile, all of that will be right in front of my eyes if you have a profile on LinkedIn or any kind of public social media. So that's shame on me if I can't have an interesting conversation with all of that, with all of those inputs.
Yeah, so it's interesting what's old becomes new again. So we've seen some iterations with COVID affecting it as well around how much you're doing live versus you're doing virtually, right? And I think obviously the travel industry is hanging on a thread. Is business travel going to be still? And right now, what we're hearing is a lot of folks like you can only get stuff done now if you go live, if you go to events, if you meet people in real life. Then you'll have, obviously your AI, your digital twin, which is going to be able to talk and say things and look like you in a video and maybe even respond. Who knows if that's going to advance enough a year or two from now that that's commonplace. I mean, do you think 5 years from now that there's going to be more business travel and events and live things going on, or do you think there's going to be less?
I think there's going to be more. I mean, I don't know. I know today I know that people, I did a talk yesterday. People are talking about why community. Why is community so interesting? Well, community, all of this is like a proxy for trust. And how do you develop trust as a human being if you can't trust AI, if there's so much fake stuff, fake writing, fake copy, fake avatars? You're going to want to bounce off of real human beings and again, you could even say, well, we're all going to wear our headsets and they're going to be super tactile, maybe, but for now, in the next couple of years, listen, I know, you tell me, Zach, are you traveling more or less than you did a couple of years ago?
I traveled a lot less, and now I'm about to start traveling a lot more.
Yeah, and I mean, I'm traveling, I gotta like look at my freaking calendar because it's like so overbuilt. I'm traveling a lot more. There's a thing on May 1st in San Francisco, but I can't go to this conference that's also in New York City. I feel like people are craving in-person connection and they're craving genuine human relationships. And I bet you that they'll buy an inferior product from somebody that they deeply trust, that they've met in person, over a better product where they don't have the same fidelity of trust because all of the interactions have been digital. I also think it's just a function of like people craving, like that's what people want. People want to be in person. I'm in my home office right now. So what am I going to do at the end of the day? I'm probably going to go out to a restaurant. I'm probably going to try and interact with human beings in person because I've been on Zooms all day. So I do think people will travel more, and I think there'll be a lot of stuff running in the background. That means that junior jobs, there'll just be a lot more coordination. Like coordinating jobs, I think will rise up, and manual repetitive task jobs will probably be subsumed by automation, which is, again, like 100 years ago or 150 years ago, whatever, for like England in the 1850s, what's the job? The job is 300 people. I don't even know how many people go into a printing mill or whatever, a weaving mill. What do they call them? I don't know. But, and there's flying jennies and whatever, and like there's tons and tons of people that are seamstresses or seamsters. I don't know. But my point is like those jobs are completely gone, and yet the world is more gainfully employed than it's ever been. So there isn't really any actual precedent for technology. Always causes deflation, and it always causes disruption and dislocation, but it doesn't have seemed to have caused unemployment. Global employment levels have risen consistently since the Stone Age.
Yeah. And so I think it's a really interesting thought as you think about, everyone talks about, is it just going to be bots selling to bots, right? And I think, as you talk about it, it sounds like to some extent, the more transactional the offering, the easier it's going to be for that to happen. But for things that are important and strategic, and if you are viewed as a valuable partner, or they are looking for a value partner, then that human connection and trust is going to become even more important, possibly. And it's interesting. Just as you're talking about, I was thinking about what people are doing with professional services, right? So many SaaS companies hated professional services because the impact of the multiples and the cost. And at some point, you start to see people realize, like, we need SaaS, we need tech, and we need service, because how else do we actually drive adoption? Are we viewed in a non-commoditized way? And so that sort of blended services, you're going to have companies, I guess, going to the different ends of the barbell. But I don't know, how do you think about, I mean, that's a kind of adjacent topic, but professional services in SaaS, like, do you think it's going to become more common, or do you think it's going to still be something looked at for partners or marketplaces?
I definitely. I run a podcast called Topline, and we had David Obran, the CEO of SalesLoft, on this week, and he made these great points about how, first of all, he made 2 points, right? So, like, before we call the death of sales, let's remember most companies, the enterprise, large enterprises, and Zach, you've sold to more of them than I have over our career, our respective, we've probably been doing 60 years of work, which is crazy. Most enterprises still have not adopted technology in a meaningful way, or at least they haven't adopted best-in-class modern technology in a meaningful way, right? So, we think we're tired of SalesLoft and Outreach and Gong and Clary, Procter and Gamble, Caterpillar, Honeywell, random $500 million private companies that are making garments in South Carolina. They still don't use any of those tools at all. So the first thing, and what is the point that David made? He's like, well, there's a challenge of distribution and there's a challenge of consumption, which means it's great if Honeywell buys SalesLoft for all of its use, for all of its salespeople. How do you get them to use it? Because that's not as easy as a 20-person mid-market VC-backed tech company where everybody already knows SalesLoft. Everybody's used something like that in their HubSpot native instance. So my point is that, do I think that professional services are going to be important? Yes, 100%. 100%. And again, I think it's because buyers want to buy a solution, not a technology. They don't want to buy features. They want to buy outcomes. And how do you guarantee? And thing number one, and then thing number two related, right? Which is what we're talking about. And I'm just thinking about it as we're talking. Trust. How do you go into a situation and trust that it's going to work? Even now, YouTube can tell me how to do almost anything, right? I want to get a better video setup for my podcasting stuff, right? I could figure it out. I could Google it. I could ask ChatGPT, and I could watch YouTube. And I'm sure if I spent 5 hours, I would feel more confident. But what do I really want to do? I want to hire some video technician person to come in and set up my home video setup. And why is that? I could get because I don't trust the way that the internet is designed. It's supported by advertising, and I don't trust that they're being real with me. You can even, anytime you Google something, the first 12 links or whatever are all sponsored. Have you ever tried to Google a hotel's website? It's like there are 15 different.
One down, right?
Yeah, exactly. And like everything else, it's like it looks like the hotel's website, and it's actually some booking.com or reservations.com. It's all some like middleman between that and the end thing that you're trying to get. And what's my point? My point is that there's just like no trust. I need a human being to be like, do this. This is going to work. This is how you need to do it. Don't worry about it. I'll take care of it for you. And I don't think that's going anywhere anytime soon.
Now, this is an interesting topic that's come up a couple times even on our podcast, is the evolution of the CSM. There is a big argument around, do they own expansion? Should they own expansion? What metrics should they have? And the evolution of that role. And there's most organizations we see are completely redesigning the function, role design, really concerned about the capabilities their existing teams have. And to some extent, they've kind of made the problem that they have worse, because a lot of those CSMs have, those teams have been decimated. And so they have 2-3 times more coverage that they're trying to work around in this capital efficient period. And now they have all this additional responsibility. where is this going to? You think this is going to evolve in the direction where CSMs of the future will be built to drive expansion and be part of that process, or do you think it's going to hem back the other way in a couple of years and it's going to be a redesign?
Hem back in which way? That they're not going to. What would be the other direction?
Well, the other direction, I guess, would be, I mean, at some level, the transactional or low potential accounts are all going to be, a lot of that work's going to be automated anyways. But at some level, with the larger accounts, is it going to be a more complex sort of sales is going to be coming back in? There's going to be a new role created, maybe that just does expansion on top as a separate layer. I mean, I'm sure there's many iterations, but it's evolving as we speak.
I think, like I said, I think I think that one of the biggest challenges of new technology is going to be adoption and consumption, right? You can sell it, but can you get people to use it? And if they don't use it, it's not going to get renewed. So there is going to be a role for someone to really focus on making sure that people use the thing. Now, in the mid-market world of capital efficiency, to your point, is it fair to say that people getting the customer to use the thing are totally different, totally unconnected to the people that are selling the thing? I think that that's a fictional delineation. I think that that you can get people to use something and still sell them something if you develop a certain amount of credibility, authority, and trust. So, does that mean that customer success is going away? No, not for big enterprises. It might still make sense to have a specialization of labor for larger or for mid-market organizations that are selling to mid-market companies. It'll probably be the same thing. I can tell you that, for larger enterprises, again, based on this conversation, like I think CS will be a critical role, and I think it'll be pulled forward pre-sale. And I think for really large deals, which is what I did when I was selling big tech, there was a deal team. And the deal team was the salesperson that was really the coordinator, of all of the different people. There was the solutions engineer. There was the customer success manager. There might have even been like a database engineer if it's super big tech. Maybe there's a executive sponsor, which might be me as the CRO. But there was like 4 or 5 people per big deal with JP Morgan or Citibank or whatever. And one of them was the customer success person that was involved before the deal happened, so that they could confidently say, and also confidently drive alignment and be like, this is what it's going to be like when you're a customer, and this is how we're going to deliver the outcomes that you want.
Got time for maybe 2 more big questions, but so I want to tap into one of the things you were saying before, and I know you're actually rolling out a course right now. I know how LinkedIn and social has been very important for you, but you talked about in the age of the influencer, who do you trust, and sort of that element. And then on top of it, if we look at how LinkedIn is evolving and the idea that everyone has to be an influencer, everyone has to post every day, I think everyone's noticed the changes in their feed. And so to some extent, is that going to cause an opposite effect where people aren't going to use LinkedIn in the same way or look to it in the same way as if they've done now? Maybe they'll look to networks like Pavilion and others in a different way. So where do you see, don't give away the secrets to your course, but at the high level, what's the evolution of social, like particularly LinkedIn? I'm really interested where you think that's going to go. Is it going to become more important or less important? And how important it is for a CEO to be an influencer these days?
The second question, I wish I had a better answer to. I don't know how important it is for a CEO to be an influencer. I think it's a double-edged sword, to be completely honest with you. I think LinkedIn is like, let's try and zoom out, right? How are you going to figure out how to do your job?
Yeah.
The job is changing every day, whatever you're doing, whoever you are, wherever you are listening to this. Your thing, what you're supposed to do today, is pretty different than it was 3 years ago. And it's going to be different in 2 years. So where are you going to go to figure out how to do your job? The answer is, are you going to go back to, you're going to get I'm going to get an online MBA from Wharton. Why? Do you really trust that they are going to be the ones to teach you what to do today? I think it's going to be I'm literally thinking about this as we're talking. I'm not just pitching my book, but like, what is the answer to that question? I got to believe that the answer to that question is you got to be connected to other people that are doing your job one way or the other, so that you can ask them questions and learn from them. And there's got to be an ethos of sharing and mentoring and apprenticeship. LinkedIn is definitely one of the places where that can happen in a big way. And if you really figure out how to do something interesting and be good at what you're doing and share, people will follow you. And there's going to be enough people that even it's 1,000 true fans. It's Chris Anderson from the beginning of the internet, right? Which is, if you're really good at doing a specific thing, there's going to be enough other people that are probably doing that thing that they're going to want to find you. And then again, what is the differentiating skill? The differentiating skill is storytelling and being interesting and compelling and having something original to say. But what if you don't? What if you're not interesting or original? Well, you're still going to need to be on LinkedIn to learn from people that are, and you're still going to be in some kind of community, whether it's Pavilion or some other kind of trade association or guild or place where you and 15 other people that are doing the same thing meet every week to talk about how you're doing what you're doing. And there's no other way. I can't see a different way to learn than talking to other practitioners. And
Yeah.
so I do think that LinkedIn, and I think, they're making changes to the algorithm and they're making, but I I can't see it diminishing in importance. And I think it's just incumbent upon communities like Pavilion to become better. And now, does that mean that the CEO specifically needs to be an influencer? That I don't know. How can I possibly say that if I'm teaching a course on LinkedIn? Because I'm worried that in the act of me becoming an influencer, the brand of my company is too closely tied to me, and that impacts the overall enterprise value, that the company itself can express itself fully if all of the value, if the idea is like, well, if Sam leaves, there's no company.
Yeah.
That's not redundancy, or anti-fragility, as Nassim Taleb would say. So that's why there's plenty of companies where the CEO isn't particularly active. I mean, obviously on the margin, I think the CEO should be the best storyteller in the organization and should be out there communicating that story to the world and using tools to do it. So where do I come out on it? Yes, I think every CEO should be sharing ideas in public. And I
Yeah, well,
think
I
that
think
creates,
that's a
or go ahead.
perfect place to wrap, because we really appreciate you coming down and sharing your stories with us, and helping other CEOs get through what can be a very difficult time right now, right? And leading some of the way. Great to have you on. Hopefully, we can have you back soon, because there's a long list of questions I'd still love to ask. Folks, pick up a copy of Kind Folks Finish First. They even have it here in Barcelona. And thanks for coming on the show. Really appreciate it.